I want to start with the Twitter files that were dropped last night. So, and I understand this can be a little bit confusing, particularly if you are not on Twitter. So let me put the whole picture available for you to start. So Elon Musk bought Twitter for $44 billion. As a part of that process, Elon Musk has said, I believe we need to shine a bright light, bring some sunshine to everything surrounding what happened with Twitter over all of the controversies in the past decade or so. So they have committed, Elon Musk and the new team at Twitter has committed that they are going to release all of these documents, that they are going to let us see for ourselves what actually took place in these stories. And so the first thing that they're doing, the very first document release, was about the New York Post. And how was it that the Hunter Biden story, the laptop, ended up getting censored, was not widely distributed? How was that decision made? All of those documents that were still in existence were shared by journalist Matt Taibbi, and you had an opportunity to check out all of that. Last night, a second document dropped. And let me just say, the New York Post story was important because it demonstrated a clear and calculated attempt, in my opinion, to influence the outcome of the 2020 election. It pretty clearly demonstrated, I believe, that the 2020 election was rigged between big tech and the Biden campaign. And the part of that story that I believe is the most compelling is the reports that the FBI was staging weekly meetings with the big tech companies to allow all of these conversations to take place, and then set in place the presumption, because remember, the FBI had Rudy Giuliani under surveillance. They knew that he had this laptop and that he was shopping it to a variety of different media outlets. They knew that this New York Post story was coming, so they went and seeded the doubt in big tech companies that this was Russian collusion, even though the FBI themselves had been in possession of this laptop since December of 2019. So the first release of the Twitter files, I think, demonstrated quite clearly a political crime that was as big as anything since Watergate, and I think quite a lot bigger, okay? That was the first release. I was completely blown away by the second release, which is what happened last night. What they released last night is definitive evidence that Twitter and top left-wing Twitter executives were intentionally altering all of the conversations that were taking place on Twitter, that people who were conservative in nature were being effectively blacklisted, hidden from search results. They laid out specifically all of these different accounts. What I would call on for Elon Musk is to make all of the public, super popular accounts, make all of what Twitter did to those accounts public. And Buck and I told you this. As soon as news came down that Elon Musk was going to buy Twitter, all of a sudden our Twitter accounts were on fire. We're adding thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of new followers. That was a pretty good sign that they were trying to burn the evidence of what they had done inside of Twitter to try to avoid consequences for their behavior. So we knew all of the evidence was out there to suggest circumstantially what was going on in terms of the rig job inside of Twitter. But what is now going on is we are seeing the actual receipts. Now the concrete evidence is coming in, and there is no way to dispute that Twitter was engaged in the greatest threat to our democracy in any of our lives by rigging things in favor of far left-wing political ideals. That's the truth. This is indisputable. So what needs to happen now? And I'm going to open up the phones and let you guys call in throughout this show, because a lot of these topics that we're going to be discussing are somewhat complicated, and I understand that a lot of you are not as active on the tech platforms. So first of all, remember, we're just getting a window into Twitter standing alone. And there's still Instagram, Google, YouTube, Facebook, all of these other, certainly TikTok, which is owned by the Chinese, but all of these other big tech platforms. Elon Musk is effectively letting us see behind the curtain how the Twitter app, how the Twitter business was run, and all the rigging that was going on. But it's not just Twitter. We just have optics on Twitter because the other big tech companies are more firmly aligned to left-wing politics and they don't want to tell on themselves. So remember, what we're seeing from Twitter is also, there's strong evidence because we know the FBI was briefing all these other tech companies. We know these tech companies are filled with far left-wing zealots. Very strong evidence that the exact same malfeasance that we are seeing from inside of Twitter is actually occurring at Facebook, at YouTube, at Google, at Instagram, and certainly at TikTok. All of these places that are wildly influential. And if you're not on social media or you're not very active on social media, I understand that. Most Americans are, and certainly your kids and grandkids are. So if you have been thinking for the past several years, and I know I have, what in the world has gone on in this country that everything has gone completely insane? This is what was going on. A handful of far left-wing activists conspired to rig our national political discourse and make people like you and me seem like we didn't exist. And people in media take so much of their lead off of what trending topics are on Twitter and what the responses are on Twitter and, frankly, what follower counts exist on Twitter, that they were leaving and using this artificially distorted reality. They were allowing that to be a representative example of the larger American marketplace. And I will just use as an example here of how this distortion has occurred. Barack Obama got elected in 2008 before social media existed, really. These companies were in their infancies. They didn't really have a strong impact. Do you know or remember what Barack Obama's 2008 campaign was like? You're going to be stunned. It was like Ronald Reagan's 1980 campaign. It was like Bill Clinton's 1992 campaign. Yes, those guys were, Clinton was a Democrat and Obama was a Democrat, but they were running effectively on the sunny side of the mountain. They ran the 1980 Ronald Reagan presidential campaign. And if you're out there and you're thinking now, remember, Obama's entire 2008 campaign was, America is so amazing that a biracial kid from Hawaii who grew up without his dad can become the president of the United States, even with a name like Obama. And people absolutely loved that campaign. Compare that campaign with the campaign that Joe Biden just ran in 2020, where he said, America's an awful racist place. America is filled, Hillary Clinton 2016, with deplorables. That you and me, if we supported Donald Trump, were evil and racist, and we were a part of Jim Crow 2.0. Think about what that transition represents. From 2008, even if you don't like Obama at all, Ronald Reagan-like campaign about how amazing America is, to 2020, America is a white supremacy-laden, awful place. And a lot of you are looking around saying, well, wait, it's just been 12 years. How did we ever get to these campaigns? How did the Hillary 2016 campaign ever arise? How did, frankly, Donald Trump's campaign of making America great again ever need to arise? Because in 2008, Obama ran on America's the greatest country that's ever existed in the history of the world. This place is amazing, and I'm an epitomization of that incredible nature of our country. I think it was because social media, starting in 2008, artificially rigged the game to convince lots of Americans through viral videos that were not representative of what was really going on in the country that this was truly an awful place. and that America, 1619 Project, everything fell directly in connection with this big tech collusion. They sold a monstrous lie that undercut the very legitimacy of this country as the greatest place in the history of the world and the freest place in the history of the world. It is, I believe, the biggest story on election rigging in our nation's history that is currently being shared by Elon Musk and Twitter. What kind of attention do you think we're getting from the people who claim that they care so much about the fate of American democracy? Remember, Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness is what they have written at the top of their newspaper. How about the New York Times, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, MSNBC, all the usual suspects? How much do you think they're actually covering the biggest story about a rig job in our nation's history? Certainly in any of our lives. They told you that Russia collusion was such a big thing in 2016. We've got actual collusion from actual American big tech companies demonstrably occurring with concrete evidence being shared by Twitter right now. And the only reason we're getting to see this is because Elon Musk spent $44 billion to buy Twitter, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But Harris Faulkner on Fox News is pointing out, hey, the coverage of this blockbuster revelation, this ongoing story that is probably the biggest and most significant in any of our lives about what exactly was going on to rig elections and to put a finger on the scale in favor of Democrats and far left-wing political ideas. The propaganda media out there is almost not even covering this at all. Listen to Harris Faulkner.
According to the Media Research Center, broadcast networks ignored the first release of the Twitter files on Tuesday of this week, and the number of minutes spent on the topic during their flagship morning and evening broadcasts as of yesterday afternoon, exactly 0. So now you have a furthering of complicity of those in the media working together with those in social media, and it all just melds together.
I mean, that's well said by Harris Faulkner on Fox News. 0. The biggest election and political scandal of our lives, and all of these legacy media outlets are not spending a single minute covering it.